Make yourself comfortable. Leave the day behind. Today, I want to tell you about a man who still trusts in old knowledge while the world rushes past. It was one of those endless, burning hot summer days in the Puszta when the train ran from Debrecen to Hortobágy. You know such days, don't you? The heat shimmers over the wide, endless plains like water that never flows, an optical phenomenon. The air trembles and ripples like living silk. And if you look long enough across the flat landscape, you see the white storks standing on distant church towers, motionless and dignified, as if they themselves were dreaming of old times. That afternoon, an older man sat across from me, his face sunburnt like old leather. His name was Andras, and he was a millet farmer. Not just any farmer, you understand, but one of the last still growing traditional millet the way his grandparents did. Most farmers here switched long ago to corn or wheat, but not Andras. He was a stubborn man, with the stubbornness of those who believe in something the world has abandoned. He opened a small linen sachet and showed me a few grains. They were tiny, golden, like sunlight frozen in grain form. They gleamed in his worn hand. "This is my life," he said quietly. "Each grain has a story. Each grain has a name. I know them all." Andras told me about his fields, stretching endlessly across the plain. "Millet needs little," he said. "It needs patience, trust, and willingness to listen to nature rather than machines. It needs a person who speaks to it, who understands it." As he spoke, I could see the Puszta appear before my eyes. I saw the stalks, thin and delicate, swaying in the wind like dancing fingers. I smelled the hay, the warm, intoxicating aroma that lay over the fields when the day was ending. It was a smell that brought peace, that made one feel at home. He described to me how each morning he went out to his fields before the greatest heat came. Sometimes it was still dark, only the first lights on the horizon showing the morning. Morning was his favorite hour. The stalks were still cool from the dew then, wet and flexible. He walked between them, barefoot sometimes, felt the earth beneath his feet. He spoke to them almost, encouraged them to grow. Some people might have called him mad, the city folk who talked of machines. But Andras knew something the world had forgotten, that plants feel it when they're treated with love, that they thrive when you listen to them, when you understand their language. A language without words, a language of chlorophyll and water transport. The processing of the millet was equally traditional. Andras showed me a faded picture of an old house he owned, a white village house with a thatched roof, like those standing all over the Puszta, silent witnesses to an older time, perhaps a better time. There he stored the harvested millet and processed it using methods that generations before him had used, methods that had proved they worked. He dried the grains on mats in the sun, on the flat roof, where the wind swirled them and cooled them. This wasn't a fast process, certainly not. Sometimes it took weeks, sometimes months of waiting. But this slowness was important, was necessary. It preserved the strength of the grains, their inner substance, their soul almost. In winter, when the earth was hard and frozen, and the nights long and dark, he sold his millet to small, carefully chosen shops in Debrecen, to people who still valued and understood traditional, real food. They were people who knew not everything should be fast and cheap. It wasn't a big business, a business that drew attention. It was barely a business at all. But Ondráš earned enough to live, to support his family, and that was the most important thing in life for him. He didn't need much: a house, his fields, seed, and the good reputation that he worked honestly and fairly. As we spoke, the sun grew lower. The landscape outside the train window took on that golden color that only occurs in these southeastern European lands. The fields became liquid gold, and each stalk cast long, long shadows. Ondráš leaned his head back and looked out as if seeing home, not for the first time, but for the 1000th time. And it still surprised him how beautiful it was. He told me that many young people left his region. They went to the cities, sought work with machines instead of earth. They wanted to live faster, earn more, achieve something. He couldn't blame them, no, really not. The life of a millet farmer was hard. It was lonely sometimes, when the autumn storm swept across the empty fields and you only saw the stalks. But it was also rich, not in money, but in something you couldn't buy, in meaning, in rootedness. Towards the end of the journey, Ondráš became very quiet. He looked out at the Puszta, the endless plain, the plain that never ended, that curved to the distant horizon like the back of a great, sleeping animal. I asked him if he didn't grow tired of this work, day after day, year after year, decade after decade. He shook his head slowly, thoughtfully, as if he were weighing the words carefully. "Tired?" he asked back, and his gaze was far away, lost in memory. "No, I'm not tired. Really not. I'm at home. I'm always at home. This millet is my home. This earth is my home. And the work is breathing." Ondráš also told me of the many difficulties he experienced daily. Young people no longer understood the craft, didn't understand patience. They saw only the hard work, the sore hands, not the deep beauty behind it. The soil grew weaker every year, exhausted by modern farming in neighboring regions. But Ondráš trusted the earth, truly. He gave it time to heal, gave it long years of rest. He rotated his fields, let them lie fallow in seasons, planted them with other useful things. That was the old knowledge, the ancient knowledge of the generations before him, the tried and tested knowledge. He also showed me an old, faded script in which his great-grandfather, more than 100 years ago, had noted the moon phases in relation to the best harvest time. Ondráš believed in such things, even if modern farmers laughed and thought him mad. There was something in nature, something deep, something almost secret, that you couldn't understand with machines. Not really. You needed time for that. Real time. Patience. Almost a kind of love. I thought of the long history of millet, of the millennia in which people had grown this grain. It wasn't modern, not trendy, but it was proved. It was right. Ondráš knew that deep inside. He wasn't someone who deceived himself or harbored unrealistic hopes. And as the train slowly pulled into Hortobágy, night settled over the Puszta like a warm, gentle blanket full of compassion. The white storks slowly withdrew to their great nests on the distant church towers, motionless and dignified, as if dreaming of old times, of better times. The shimmering heat haze gradually disappeared, like breath growing slower. The earth breathed out, ready to rest for the night. Ondrash stood to get off, and I recognized in his tired eyes a deep, genuine peace. A peace that only someone knows who's devoted his whole long life to one simple, true, beautiful thing. The scent of dry hay and distant mills still hung in the warm air, sweet and promising. The train rolled smoothly on, and outside the world was now quite dark. Only a few lights in the distance, single windows where other people too were settling down to rest. I thought how many people in the world at that moment were falling asleep, each in his bed, in his compartment, in his room, and how we were all part of a great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great, friendly creature that carried us all together through the darkness, through time. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment, I thought. Just for a moment. But then images came behind my eyelids. No clear pictures, only colors, soft colors, blue and grey, and a bit of gold from the lamp in the compartment. And those colors mixed into something that was no longer seeing and not yet dream. The train went on, ta-dum, ta-dum, and each ta-dum was a little bit further away, as if the train weren't quite in the same space as me anymore, as if I were already halfway somewhere else, halfway to the land where tiredness lives, where everything becomes simple. The train leaves Hagen, heading towards Iserlohn, the journey's end. It's spring, and the industrial landscape of the Bergisches Land slowly opens up. Let's green meadows show through. Let's hope show through. And in this carriage sits a woman, with arms that have strength, visible strength, with hands that know fire, heat, history. Her name is Gisela, and she's a Brasssmith, a true craftsperson, almost an artist. Iserlohn was once Germany's brass city. Workshops everywhere, fire from the smithies everywhere, people working with brass everywhere, sheen everywhere, that orange gold color everywhere. Today, most of the workshops are closed, empty, demolished, replaced by office buildings. The industry has gone elsewhere, to China perhaps, or nowhere at all. But Gisela still works in an old workshop, small but perfect, with tools that are generations old, some 200 years old. She makes fittings, small works of art in brass, beautiful pieces that are fixed to furniture, drawer pulls, elegant handles that sit perfectly in the hand, edges for boxes, decorative pieces for antique furniture. She works too on buttons, small works of art in brass that have weight, that shine beautifully, that function, that last for years. Brass is an alloy, a mixture of copper and zinc, an old art, mixing the proportions exactly right. Gisela gets her brass from suppliers she knows, from people who respect the same tradition, who don't just sell cheap. The brass is melted in the furnace that stands in the heart of the workshop and roars like an animal. The heat is intense, unbelievable. The flame is orange, red, almost white, blinds the eyes. Gisela wears special goggles, gazes into this heat as if into the sun. The molten brass is poured into molds, into sand molds that Gisela makes herself, that she shapes and forms herself with knife and pen. The molds are made of fine sand, Italian sand, shaped with artistry, unique, some of them years old, decades old, but still functioning. When the brass solidifies, when it cools, when it's no longer glowing red like blood, when it's cooled down, an object comes out, still rough, still unfinished, bearing all the marks of heat, with burrs and unevenness, with excess, with life. Then the real work begins, the long, detailed, precise work of refinement. Gisela takes the cast pieces and polishes them, one after another, with great care. With file and stone, with emery and love, she makes them smooth, makes every surface perfect. She checks every edge, every curve, every detail. If something isn't right, if something isn't perfect, if the proportions are off, she does it again, melts it again, casts it again, doesn't give up. The details matter, are crucial. Everything depends on them. A handle must sit perfectly in the hand, grow warm after years. Not too large, not too small. A button must be clean, without scratches, without blemishes, without flaws. An edge must be sharp, but not dangerous. Must be able to cut if needed, but not injure itself. Gisela checks everything with eyes trained by decades, with her hands, with her feel, with her experience. She knows if something is right without thinking. Her hands know it. The workshop gleams with brass everywhere. Shining pieces lie about in various stages of manufacture, from raw to polished to perfect. The tools hang on the walls, old, dark, with the sheen and patina of decades. The anvil, on which Gisela sometimes works, is black, massive, smooth, has a weight that's impossible, that barely two people can lift. It's one of the few things older than the workshop itself. The heat in the workshop is constant, always, but not unpleasant, not in spring when the windows are open. There are large windows, old windows, that are opened wide in the morning and let in fresh air, let out the smoke and the heat. The furnace draws, the air flows through it, swirls, dances, choreographed. And with the air comes the light, that soft, green light from outside, from the trees now putting on new growth, coming alive again, that makes the workshop golden, makes it beautiful. Gisela works with other people in the workshop. Real teamwork, real collaboration, mutual support, mutual respect. A man, older than her, about 77, Rolf, who knows traditional smithcraft like few others in Germany, who helped her learn this difficult work, who had patience with her, who didn't give up even though the work was hard. And a young man, just out of his apprenticeship, 22, Stefan, who still has so much to learn, but who has potential, who has the right hands, the right attitude, the right mentality, who understands that craft is valuable. The workshop is small enough that everyone knows each other, understands each other, can work together like a family, like a community, not like employer and employee, but like artists together. The customers are furniture restorers, antiques dealers, passionate collectors, people who want to make old furniture beautiful again, who understand that's valuable. The details matter. The details make the artwork. They write Gisela detailed letters on fine paper, describing exactly what they need, what they want, what the vision is. Sometimes they even sketch it with exact measurements, with all details, with notes. Or they send old pieces, antique handles, antique locks, so Gisela knows what it should look like, how it should feel, how it works, what the tradition is. Then she makes it, identical to the original, or better still, makes it so it becomes better, more beautiful, more durable, more stable, works better. That's the art. Not matching the original, but becoming better. A piece of furniture with fittings by Gisela looks different, looks better. It doesn't look new, not smooth and sterile like a factory, but it looks alive, breathes quality. The brass has warmth, has dignity, has soul. When you touch it, when you run your fingers over it, you feel the work behind it. Weeks of work, decades of experience. You feel the hands that made it, the patience, the love, the respect. Gisela is 33 years old. No, 63. Nearly 67. Her hands are large, powerful, muscular, but sensitive too when they need to be. They can hold a tiny piece of brass, tiny as a coin, and at the same time bear the heat of the furnace, feel the blood of the brass. They can swing a tool with force, but also do fine detail work, microscopically small work. They're master's hands, they are, trained for decades, that know everything, that can do everything. The train is now slowly approaching Iserlohn, slowing down, the journey nearly over. Gisela gazes out long at the city, at the industrial landscape, the landscape with the old factories, at the landscape she knows, that she loves, where she was born, where she grew up. She thinks of the workshop, of the new order just arrived. A beautiful cutlery box, 100 years old, of dark walnut, that needs new fittings, that needs its lock renewed, that needs complete restoration. She can see it while the train moves, sees it in her mind in detail, how she'll do it, where the details will sit, the proportions, how the brass will shine, how warm it will be. And if one day you hold an old, beautiful piece of furniture, if you grasp a handle, an antique brass button that gleams like gold, that grows worn in your hand, that sits perfectly in your palm, then think of Gisela. Think of the furnace, of the molten brass glowing orange like magma, of the file, of the patience, of the years, decades of work. Thank your fingers for being able to feel this shine, this smooth, perfect work, this love that dwells within it, this soul. This handle will outlive you, will still exist in 100 years, will still warm someone's hand, will still bring beauty into a house. The train ran through a tunnel, and for a brief moment it was completely dark outside. Only the rush, only the echo of the wheels on the tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we were outside again, and the night took us back as a mother takes her child back in her arms after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnel and night, and tunnel again, and night again, and always further on. And at some point you no longer notice what's outside and what's in, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so near that you can already smell it. And as the train moved on through the night, ta-dun, ta-dun, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a humming like distant bees, or like an old song I heard as a child and now can't quite remember. The warm current of air in the compartment settled around me like a blanket, and I felt my shoulders slowly sink down. Felt the tension of the day fall away from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without hurry, without sorrow. Hamburg on a December morning is like a painting by someone who loves greys. The sky and the Elbe are nearly the same color, nearly the same temperature. The platform was almost empty as I boarded the train to Westerland, to Zilt. It's a wonderful journey, this route, because it takes you across the Hindenburg Causeway, that long, narrow bridge connecting mainland to island. A moment between two worlds. But that morning, I wasn't ready for the beauty of such a moment. I was tired of the world, and I simply wanted to sit. Then I saw him. A man, perhaps in his early 50s, with weary eyes. The sort of weariness that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from inner labor. He was sitting with a brown leather suitcase on his lap, hands protective upon it. A suitcase that looked as though it had made many journeys, but not in this life, in an earlier one, in another life. I took the seat across from him. That was a moment. I don't know why I did it. Normally I wouldn't sit opposite a stranger, but communication between us had already begun before we'd spoken a word. A kind of understanding. The man glanced up for half a second, then looked down again. His eyes weren't depressed, but careful, like someone who'd learned not to hope, but also not to despair. The train began to move. Hamburg slipped away. Buildings and harbour channels and the ordinary frenzy of a large city. The man set the suitcase aside and picked it up again. This little ritual repeated itself several times in those first minutes. He couldn't sit still with it, yet he couldn't let go of it either. Finally, he opened it slightly. I could see paper, many papers, letters I presumed, packed closely. He closed it again. "These are," he said without preamble, without hello. "These are the ones I didn't manage to deliver. Not the ones I couldn't write, or the ones I didn't want to, but the ones I didn't manage to deliver." I could have asked which letters, but that would have been a question that might have interrupted him. Instead, I said, "A long journey?" He smiled, a genuine smile with a gap in his teeth, with a kind of wistfulness, but also a smile that held peace. "A year," he said, "a whole year. I retired early, at 60, and I decided, well, not decided. It was more like a demand from within. I decided to write all the letters I should have written. He fell silent. Before us, fields flew past, flat, wet, November wet. "Letters to whom?" I asked. He said, "People I wronged, people I didn't tell things to, people I hurt, or not hurt, but didn't see." "How many?" I wanted to ask, but didn't. He answered anyway. 105, he said. "I've written 105 letters. I've traveled on trains from city to city, from village to village, and I've found them, or found their addresses, sometimes after long searching, and I've delivered the letters. Not all at their doorstep, you understand. Sometimes it was difficult. Sometimes they wouldn't open the door. Sometimes they'd moved. Sometimes..." He fell silent again. His breathing was steady, orderly, like someone who'd learned to arrange his feelings, not suppress them, but arrange them, like books in a library. "And the ones still in the suitcase?" I couldn't hold back the question. He looked into the suitcase, then at me. "Some letters never find their recipient," he said. "Some people have died. Some people... I've searched and searched, but the world is so large, and sometimes people simply vanish. Just gone. No trace." It was factual, but not harsh. A statement, not a complaint. I asked, "And now?" He said, "Now I'm traveling to Zut. This is the final journey. There's one letter I wanted to deliver myself. It's the most important one. The first, chronologically, but I wrote it last. It's the letter to myself, from the man I was. I want to read it by the sea. I want to read it there, and then..." He made an incomplete gesture, as if something might dissolve into the air and drift away. The landscape changed. We were approaching the North Sea. The fields became lower, marshier, salty in their nature. The sky opened, like an eye that had been closed for a long time. The man stared out. His face was relaxed, but not empty. It was fulfilled. It was as if he were finally arriving, somewhere. "The causeway comes next," he said. "The best minute of the whole journey. A minute where you see nothing but water and sky. A minute where you float." And then it came. The train approached the bridge, the narrow, long bridge, and suddenly we were no longer on Earth. We were between sky and sea, between here and there. Grey and more grey, and within that grey, an unspeakable beauty. The man placed his hand on the sill of his window, and I saw that his eyes held tears. Not tears of sorrow, you understand, but tears of someone who'd arrived. Who'd actually arrived after a long journey. His other hand gripped the brown suitcase firmly. We travelled over the sea. A minute, perhaps two. In that time, no one spoke. The other passengers, there were 2 or 3 in our compartment, were sleeping or reading, but I could see they too sensed this was an extraordinary moment. A moment in which space and time altered, in which the earth opened up, in which everything stilled. Only the roll of the train and the roar of the wind and the sound of the sea beneath us. Westerland came slowly into view. Green trees, ordinary houses, the return to landscape. The man leaned back. The suitcase rested on his lap now, but he no longer gripped it tight. It was as though he might let it go, could wish to. But he didn't wish to. Not now. Not today. "Thank you," he said to me, though I'd done nothing, though I'd only listened. "Thank you for not asking whether people wanted the letters. Thank you for not asking whether forgiveness is possible. Thank you for simply bearing witness." The train came to a stop. Sylt. The end of the line. The end of this journey. The man stood, took his suitcase. Before he left, he placed his hand on my shoulder for just a moment. His palm was warm, though it trembled slightly. "The letter to myself," he said. "I've already read it. And do you know what it said?" I shook my head. It said, "Thank you for trying. That is enough." It was always enough. And then he was gone, his figure in the December wind, his brown suitcase in his hand. And I remained seated, and the train was now still, and the world was still. And somewhere in my thoughts, letters were being written. Letters to people I'd wronged. Letters to myself. Letters to the past. All unwritten. But now, with this man's words, they began to write themselves, slowly, in the darkness, as my eyes grew heavy, heavier. You sit very still at the window, and I see it at once. The way your hands rest, how your gaze drifts so gently over the fields that are turning green this March. I don't ask right away, but I see it. The delicate white lily in your lap, which you hold firmly, but without trembling. It's not the excitement of a wedding the way you imagine it, not the flutter, not the restlessness. It's something quieter, and you notice that at once. The train from Mainz to Wiesbaden isn't long, but you need it. I can feel that. You need this time entirely for yourself, this last hour before a new life. I sit across from you, and you smile. But it's a smile that's been planned for a long time, that you've practiced many nights alone in your room before the mirror. It's not a false smile, no. It's a real one. But it's the smile of someone who knows that big things can begin very quietly. Your dress is dark, practical, beautiful in its simplicity. Not the white of before, not that enormous skirt, not all that machinery you normally drag along. No, you come quietly, really, without much fuss. And I like that about you at once. This clarity, this determination, without noise. You're traveling to something beautiful, I say simply, and you nod very gently. You don't need questions that bombard you with joy. You just need silence that understands you. Silence that recognizes this is a big moment, big and quiet at the same time. The woman passing by you glances at you for a moment, sees the lily, sees your dress, and I notice she understands something. She smiles at you, not pity, but recognition. A woman who's also married, who's also had fears, who understands that weddings aren't all the same, and that the quiet ones might be the bravest. The flower in your lap is like a small affirmation, not showy, not for everyone, very private, After a while, you tell me that this is the second wedding. The first was 20 years ago, and it was very different. Rushed, full of noise, full of outside expectations. A young bride who had no time to think, for whom everything went too fast. And now you sit here, traveling quietly to someone who's already known you for a long time, who's already lived with you through joy and sorrow, who's seen your faults, your scars, your strengths, and who wants you anyway. That's a different kind of courage, you probably think. Not the courage of a beginning, but the courage of a second try. The courage to believe again. The courage to take your time, to breathe, to say, "This is right, and I know it because I've lived, and I know who I am." "It's so different this time," you whisper, and I see in your eyes, there's no fear. There's only a deep, warm gratitude. Gratitude for the years between, for the pain you've overcome, for the strength you found by learning to be alone, really alone, and discovering who you are when nobody around you is telling you who you should be. The lily rests in your hands like a secret you carry with you. You tell me he doesn't know about it, that he'll be surprised when he picks you up at the station. Surprises are good, you say, when they're true. And that's a deep truth I hear in your words, that all this is true, that this isn't an adventure, isn't a game, isn't an escape. This is a step, chosen, planned, lived. Spring flies past the windows. Everywhere the buds want to burst open. The world becomes colourful after the grey. And here you sit, in this moment, between your old life and the new, and you're completely present in it. You observe the light on the meadows. You breathe. I see how your body sways with the rhythm of the train, calm, relaxed, ready. "How long have you known each other?" I ask very quietly, and you answer, "Long enough to know it's right, short enough to still feel it." And that says it all. It's not the long love of films, not the passion of youth. It's a more mature love, a love that looks and says, "Yes, this is good. I want this." Not because I dream of it, but because I know who I am, and I know this person fits well with that. You ask me if I'm married, and I say, "Long ago. She's dead." And you say, "Do you miss her?" And I answer, "Every day, but happy." And you smile, and it's like understanding between two people who know that love isn't always forever, but it's still real, still matters. The other passengers on the train notice nothing. The businesswoman with her laptop, the young man with his phone, the older couple beside us. They don't notice that history is happening. But I see it. This bride here is not nervous, not trembling, not full of drama. This bride here is relaxed, focused, present. She's not wearing a bridal gown, just a beautiful dark dress. And that one lily, really just that one lily, not roses, not tulips, one lily that's symbol and secret at the same time. And that's perfect. That's real. That's a woman who knows who she is and acts on it. Not because she's rebelling against tradition, but because it's true for her. Because this is her truth. You tell me about your children, who are already grown, both in their mid-30s. They're glad, yes. They've heard that someone new is coming into the family. And nobody demands that it's perfect, that it looks like a storybook. They see your joy, and that's enough for them. They trust you. They trust your heart. They know you make good decisions because you've had a long time to learn to do that. And so you sit here, this strong, quiet woman in your 50s, with your life behind you, and the train carries you forward, rail after rail, and each rail brings you closer to something you truly want. Not because it has to happen, because society expects it, but because you want it, completely free and completely conscious. Time passes very quickly on this route. Mainz to Wiesbaden is only a breath, really. But for you, it's no breath. It's an entire universe, an entire life reorganizing itself. It's a transition. It's your transition. And I see how calmly you hold it, how much you honor it, how you know that some things are bigger than the time available for them. "I'm so happy," you say at some point, quite simply. And it sounds like a truth that comes deep from within you, that isn't staged, isn't expected. Not like something you say when your eyes are bright with tears and the wedding music plays, but like something that feels like home, like peace, like the home you've always wished for. You look at the lily once more, and you smile, truly from your heart. This is your moment. This is your life, finally. This isn't the wedding others planned for you, not the story others would tell. This is your wedding, your story, your truth. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything you need. The train slows down, and I can already see Wiesbaden. You carefully pack your lily away. Your hands are calm. You look at me and smile. This time, it's not the practiced smile, but one that comes from this moment, from this journey, from this silence we've shared. "Thank you," you say, "for simply being here." I nod. And the good thing about a train is that some passengers come and go, but what happens between them in those few moments, that stays. And as the train moved on through the night, ta-dum, ta-dum, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle hum, a humming like distant bees, or like an old song I heard as a child and now can't quite remember. The warm current of air in the compartment settled around me like a blanket, and I felt my shoulders slowly sink down. Felt the tension of the day fall away from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without hurry, without sorrow. You stand on the platform in Berlin, and I see it at once. The way you hold the ticket as if it were made of gold, as if it might slip away if you let it go. Your eyes are red from crying, but it's not sad crying. It's the crying of someone who's missed something great and now, finally, gets the chance to make up for it. Potsdam isn't far from Berlin, only half an hour. But for you, this half hour is a journey you've been waiting for a long time. Since the call came, since your son sent the message. Your first meeting with your grandchild. The first. And you're alone. You can see that too. You look around as if searching to see if anyone is accompanying you, but there's only you. And that's all right. It's even fitting. You need this journey for yourself, alone, to prepare for what's coming. I sit down beside you, and you don't even notice at first that I'm here. You stare out the window, your hands trembling a bit. Not from fear, but from anticipation, from tension, from feelings too large for your old body. You breathe slowly, try to stay calm, but it doesn't really work. My first grandchild, you say after a while, quite suddenly, quite unexpectedly, as if it simply had to come out, as if it would suffocate you if you didn't speak. I wasn't there when he was born. I was still abroad with my work. Always abroad, always busy. And now, you fall silent. Your voice fails. And I see that what you don't say is almost worse than anything else. The regret. The time you can't get back. You tell me a bit about your years away from home. You were an engineer. You built all over the world. Bridges in Africa, houses in Asia, infrastructure in South America. Important things, as you explained to me. Things people needed. Projects that couldn't have happened without you. But more important than this? That's clearly something you're asking yourself seriously for the first time. And I see that question breaks you a bit, that you never thought you'd ask it, that maybe those projects weren't as important as what you missed at home. The birth was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. 2 whole weeks during which this little person has lived, and you weren't there. 2 weeks, and now you sit on the train, and it feels as if your heart might jump out of your chest. You have a photo on your phone that your son sent you. The little boy, still quite pink, still quite new, still quite unknown, but also quite familiar somehow. You look at the photo, and there's something in it that carries you away, that pulls you. Somehow you recognize yourself in his features, recognize your son, recognize the time that's passed. I don't know how to be a grandfather, you admit, and that's a great honesty that brings tears to your eyes. I wasn't good at being a father. I was always away, always busy, always somewhere else, always more important than my son. And now it will be hard to forgive myself for what I missed. And I hear the regret in it, but something else too. I hear determination. I hear a man who doesn't want to make the same mistakes, who doesn't want to lose another generation. I hear a man who's grasped a second chance, not because it's easy, but because he must, because his heart can't bear this loss of time any longer. The train accelerates, and the suburbs of Berlin give way to greener countryside. It's summer, and everything glows in bright green, and you open your little package, which you've prepared carefully. Small things for a newborn boy, which you've selected with great love. A rattle made of wood, not plastic, because you want it to be natural. A romper in blue. A book with pictures, one your son loved as a child, that you should have read to him more back then. Too much? You ask nervously, and I say, no, exactly right. That's exactly what a baby needs. Your hands, your time, your love. You tell me about your son, that he never really understood you, that the distance between you grew like grass over an old wound, like a scar that never quite heals. That the years abroad turned into distance between you, and that your son often didn't call because it hurt too much to miss you. But now with the grandchild, your son feels something new, something warming. Now the family wants to come together again, not completely yet, but the door is open. And your son has opened it for you, has called you, has given you this chance. I don't want to make the same mistake, you say seriously. I want to be there for him, at least for him. And I believe you. I see it in your eyes how much you'll love this little one. This boy you're just getting to know, who you're just beginning to travel to in Potsdam. You ask me if I'm a grandfather. I say, no, but I see one in front of me. And you smile so gently that my heart nearly breaks. The journey is long enough that we have plenty of time, and you need the time. You mention that you're nervous, very nervous. What if your son can't really forgive you? What if he feels unwelcome, sees your presence as too little or too late? What if the little one cries and you can't soothe him, and that proves you'll also be a failure as a grandfather? What if you forget how to be with babies, if you ever really knew? But I tell you, very slowly, very calmly, you don't need to do much. You just need to be there. That's already everything. That's already more than enough. Your son called you, invited you. That means he wants you. And the little boy, your grandchild, he needs you too. Needs to know that his grandfather is there for him, that there's love spanning the years. The summer outside is bright and full of life. Young mothers with prams everywhere, grandmothers with grandchildren, families together. And you watch, and you feel something new awakening in you. Something that the years abroad couldn't have. The connection to a life that goes on, that becomes new, that depends on you, that needs you. You open the ticket again and look at it. Hold it tight. Read your name on it. This little ticket is your ticket back into life, back to your family. Then you imagine how you'll travel back from Potsdam, not because it's over, but because it's just beginning. With stories about your grandchild in your head, about his first sound, his first smile, with photos on your phone that your son shows you, with the promise to come back, soon, next week, next month, again and again. You won't be away for much longer. You know that now. The years abroad are over, or at least their meaning changes. There's something more important than the projects, than the career. There's a little person who carries your blood, and a son who's hopeful again at last. Thank you, you say to me suddenly, for drawing everything out of me without really doing it, for listening. The train slows down, and Potsdam comes into sight. You gather your little gifts together. You brush off your jacket. You stand up. Your legs are a bit uncertain. It's not the uncertainty of an old man. It's the uncertainty of a man being born again. I'll be a good grandfather, you say to yourself quietly. And then, to me, promise. I just nod. And I really believe it. The train rolled smoothly on, and outside, the world was now quite dark. Only a few lights in the distance, single windows where other people too were settling down to rest. I thought how many people in the world at that moment were falling asleep, each in his bed, in his compartment, in his room, and how we were all part of a great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great, friendly creature that carried us all together, through the darkness, through time. The suitcase isn't large, but it's heavy with meaning. You sit there, this woman in her 50s, and your hands lie flat on it, as if protecting it, as if it were fragile. The train from Hamburg to Kiel hasn't left yet, but inside you, a whole journey is already underway. A journey that's been long in coming. It's autumn, and the windows of the train reflect golden light, the light of change, of new beginnings. You look around, and your eyes are large, not from fear, but from wonder, from disbelief. The first time you're traveling anywhere entirely alone, really alone. Not to visit someone, not to help someone, but to visit yourself. The first time this suitcase doesn't smell of a visit, doesn't smell of "I'll be back soon," but of "this is my new home. It's mine, only mine." I sit across from you, and you smile politely, but then you lose yourself in your thoughts again. And that's all right. I understand that very well. Big moments sometimes need solitude, even when you're not alone. You need space for your feelings, space for this freedom that's new for you. First flat of your own? I ask very gently, and you nod slowly. The first in my life, you confirm. At 49. And it doesn't sound reproachful, more amazed, more like a wonder. It sounds like a wonder that it took so long, yes, but also like a wonder that it happens at all, that you managed it. You tell me slowly, very slowly, about your years before. You were the youngest child, the one who was always there. By the family that needed you, your mother who was ill, then became even more ill, and you were there. Your father, who never really saw you, who didn't understand your dreams, but was dependent on you, on your help, on your presence. Your sister with her problems, her worries, who always needed only you. And you stayed where you were, in the house that should have been your home, but was simply the place where you were useful, where your love was needed, but not your dream, not your life. And now, you ask yourself as you speak, now they're all in a place where they don't need me anymore. And I left so quickly. It's not bitter the way you say that. It's grateful. It's sad. It's free. All at once. The suitcase opens a bit in your thoughts. You tell me what's inside. Not much. A few pieces of clothing, your favorite book, photos of the family, yes, despite everything. A photo of you as a child, where you still laughed, before everything became hard. And a plant, a little flower you've grown yourself. The life you're taking with you. I haven't actually seen the flat yet, you admit. And it's difficult for you to admit that. Only videos, on the internet. Only photos I've looked at, again and again, every night, to see if it's real. And that makes you nervous and excited at the same time. It could be a disappointment, The videos lie sometimes. Reality is sometimes smaller, darker, different. But it could also be the first real thing that belongs only to you, that isn't shared, that won't be entered by your mother in the morning, that belongs only to you. You work as a secretary, you've told me, for 30 years. Untrained, as you say, but loyal. Always loyal. And the boss, this older gentleman, he helped you find the flat, looked at it with you, told you it's good for you. Why, I ask? Because he saw I had to leave, you answer simply. Because he noticed I was dying if I didn't go. That love for the family suffocates if you don't love yourself too. And some people are like that. They see when others stay because they can't leave, because the love or guilt or fear is too great. And they help. And that's rare. And that's valuable. The light becomes more orange as we travel, and it's really like gold. The autumn in this region is like a child turning everything to gold before it sleeps. And you sit here on this train, and you're being transformed too. Not quickly, not dramatically, but quite gently. From a daughter, a carer, a helper to others, into a woman who belongs to herself. I'm so excited, you whisper, and your hand trembles. And so guilty. For leaving? For taking so long. For abandoning them when they still need me. For the years I didn't live. But I don't quite understand that. I tell you calmly, you didn't take too long. You took what you needed to take. And now you're here, and that's exactly how it should be. Your family still loves you. Love doesn't need proximity to be real. You ask me if I think you're selfish, and I tell you no, and I mean it with all my heart. It's not selfish when you rescue yourself. It's not selfish when you finally say, I need something too. I deserve something too. It's necessary. It's the definition of survival. The other passengers on the train don't notice what a great journey is taking place here. For them, it's simply a journey, Hamburg to Kiel, half an hour, people coming and going. But for you, it's a transition. From there to here. From grey to gold. From foreign to mine. From not existing to existing. You open your suitcase and take out a little tin box. You open it with trembling hands, and inside are banknotes you've saved for many months. Every penny you could spare. For furniture, you say proudly. Brand new furniture. Quite small, quite cheap. A table, perhaps, a chair, a bed that belongs only to me, but new for me. And that's the most precious part of this whole moment, that you value yourself enough to buy small things new. To not take the old, worn-out things from home, the memories of sacrifice, of doing without, but to say, I deserve something new. I deserve to start fresh. I deserve a flat that's mine, with furniture I've chosen, that's new, that has no history. What will you do first in your new flat? I ask very gently. Breathe, you answer, and your eyes grow moist. Really, deeply. With the door closed, completely alone, I'll close the door and I'll breathe. And nobody will ask me where I was, when I'll be back, if everything's all right. I'll just breathe. And that's everything you need. That's everything you deserve. That's what freedom looks like. That's what self-love looks like. Not big and dramatic, but still and quiet and deep breaths. The train slowly slows down and the speed decreases, and with it, your nervousness, your fear. Kiel comes into sight, and your flat is already there, waiting for you, already empty, already yours. Your hands don't tremble anymore. Your eyes glow, really, from within. The suitcase feels lighter now, though nothing inside has changed, though the things are still the same. It's just your heart that became lighter, that was freed, that finally knows it's possible. You sit still for a moment, look out the window, look at the city coming. My city, you murmur. My flat. My life. You gather everything together, your new, old life, your suitcase with its golden secrets, with your saved treasures. Thank you, you say to me, for understanding me without my having to explain everything, for knowing that this matters. And I nod, and I know that from now on, you go alone, and that's exactly how it should be. That's exactly right. You don't need anyone else to understand you anymore. You understand yourself now. You board the train, and I see it at once. It's not just your body that's old. Your gaze carries the weight of decades spent elsewhere. The burden of a flight that never quite felt like a choice. Your ticket says Frankfurt to Fulda, and your hands grip it so tightly, as if it would run away if you weren't careful, as if it would vanish into smoke. You sit beside the window, and your eyes lose themselves in the landscape sliding past. I see that you know this route, or you remember it, which is sometimes the same thing. Every curve, every tree, every signal might still know you. Your lips move as if you're telling an old story, just to yourself, a story you've gone through again and again in your head. You're traveling home, I say, very gently, and it's not a question. You nod without looking at me. Look at your hands holding the ticket. Home, you repeat, and it sounds foreign in your mouth, like a word in a language you've forgotten. After 39 years. 39 years. That's an eternity. That's almost a whole lifetime. That's longer than you lived in that village. You tell me slowly, very slowly, like a man drawing water from a dry well, drop by drop. You were young when you left, just 19, and you had dreams bigger than your body. The village was too small, far too small. The world was too large, infinite, full of possibilities you'd never see if you stayed. You fell in love with distance, with possibility, with flight, with the idea of someone you could be if you just left. And you went, and you didn't look back, because it hurt too much, because the fear was too great that you wouldn't be welcome. Your home village is small, you say, with this new pain in your voice. A few hundred people, all the same people who knew you, the same church, the same bells, the same inn, the same paths you walked as a child. The same house where you were born. The same as it always was, probably. Time doesn't move there like it does elsewhere. But you didn't stay the same. You've been everywhere else. America, Australia, South Africa. You've built, lived, loved, lost. You've lived a large life, loud and full of activity. But was it fulfilling? You ask yourself that now as you grow older. And now? I ask very calmly. Now I'm an old man, you say, and your voice cracks a bit. And my heart tells me it's time. Time to go home. Time to close my life. Not end it, but close it, the way you close a book you've read. And maybe my brother and we can... I don't know. Maybe we can still find each other before it's too late. Autumn shimmers outside in browns and orange gold, and it's exactly the same season you left in back then. The trees prepare for sleep, push their energy inward, prepare for a long winter. And you sit here on this train, and you're also preparing for something. Not sleep, maybe, but for an ending, for a circle closing. You tell me about your brother, who's still there, who's been there all along, still living in the house where you both grew up. The family that knew you and forgot you, because it had to, because it's easier to forget someone who's gone. Your mother, long dead now, maybe 10 years already. And you weren't there, not for the death, not for the days before, not for the grief after. It will be strange, you say, and the reality of what you're doing hits you now, really hits you. I don't know these people anymore. My brother has aged, has lived without me. The aunts are probably dead too. The village has changed, and they don't know me. The boy I was is dead. The man I am is a stranger. But you want to go anyway. I see that so clearly. It's not from duty, not from guilt, but from a deep, quiet necessity. To make round something that was open like a wound that's been open for 40 years. You tell me about a woman you loved in America for a long time. She was beautiful and intelligent, and you thought that loving her would be enough to hold you in one place. But it didn't work, because your heart was always elsewhere, divided between two worlds, always in that small village you didn't really want either. And now your wife has a new man, someone who could be present, who could feel at home in one country. And you're alone. And alone you ask yourself, for the first time in decades, what remains? What remains of a life lived everywhere and nowhere? What remains when you've been everywhere and haven't quite belonged anywhere? What remains when love wasn't enough to hold you and flight couldn't save you? The journey is long enough to breathe, and you need time to breathe. The train carries you forward, rail after rail, closer to something you forgot you could feel. Closer to the roots, to the beginnings, to the place where you started. I think my brother was surprised that I called, you admit to me. He didn't even know I was still alive. We haven't spoken, not really, since I left. And it sounds sad, but also gentle, also accepting. You called him a week ago. A week! And that was the first time in 39 years you'd heard his voice. You told him, "I'm coming. I'm going to visit you. I want to see the old world before it no longer sees me. Before I no longer see." And your brother said, "Okay, I'll get the guest room ready." The guest room, not your old room. That's right. That's fair. You're not the same person who it was, who left it. The room isn't the same. The world isn't the same. But maybe there's still a place for you at the table. You ask me if you're crazy, if you're too old, if it's too late. And I tell you calmly, no, you're brave. That's a kind of courage that not many people have. The courage to face what you've abandoned without knowing if you'll be welcome. And that's the truth. It takes courage to meet yourself. Not the version you learned to be as an adult, not the built walls, but the original, the one you left behind at some point when you went away. The person you were before you became an engineer, a worker, a stranger. The landscape becomes more familiar with every minute, every rail. Your breathing becomes slower, deeper, as if your body is already preparing for the homecoming. It's as if the train isn't just carrying you, but also the years, the decades, all the time between you and this place. It's as if the train is bringing the past and present together in this moment. "I don't know how long I'll stay," you say, and it's the truest thing you tell me. "Maybe a week, maybe 2, maybe I'll stay forever. Maybe I'll find I can't stay." The unknown it's frightening and freeing at the same time. And that's the beautiful part, that you don't yet know. That this is still open, that your life is still open, that it's still possible that things change, that people meet, that forgiveness is possible, that it's not too late. The train slows down, and Fulda comes into sight. And you sit up straight, and your eyes are clear, and I see that you're ready. Not easy, not joyful, but ready. With the full weight of your life on your shoulders, which you'll finally carry home. "Thank you," you say to me. "It helped, telling someone the story before I live it." And I nod, and I know that from now on you go alone, and that that's the right thing. Your brother will be waiting for you at the station, and that will be the first meeting in 39 years. And maybe it won't be perfect, but it will be real, and that's enough. You sit there with your rucksack beside you, and your eyes are awake, far too awake for so early in the morning. The train from Braunschweig to Wolfenbüttel isn't crowded yet, and you can breathe, can have space around you. The window shows you a winter grey, a frost white, the first light just beginning to forget the night. You sit very upright, as if you're already wearing a white coat, as if the coat is carrying you. But you're still only wearing a dark blue coat, and the whole tension of a big first day. The tension is like electric energy in your body. Your hands hold a cup of tea, but they tremble a bit. Excitement and nervousness, both at once, both living in your body, both true, both real. "Your first day at the practice," I say. Not as a question, it's a statement, and you look at me surprised. "How do you know?" you ask, and your voice is amazed, also a bit frightened. And I smile. I see it. You're glowing, and at the same time you're nervous. That's the combination I recognize. You smile too, but it's a smile with something uncertain in it, something fragile. I glow because I'm afraid I'll get everything wrong straight away, that I'll harm someone, that I'll miss a diagnosis, that I'll write a prescription incorrectly, that I'm too young, too inexperienced, too unknowing. You're 29. You've got 6 years of medical school behind you. 6 long years. Countless exams you've passed. Endless nights with textbooks and scripts, with lectures and practicals, with the bloody walls of hospital corridors. You've learned how the human body works, all the systems, all the paths the blood flows, how the lungs breathe, how the heart beats. You've learned how to heal it, how to listen to it, how to understand the signals. And now you're traveling for the first time to a real practice. Not as an intern, not as a student assistant, not as someone just watching, but as a doctor, as a physician, with your name on the nameplate. A rural doctor's practice in Wolfenbüttel. Small, they tell you, but important. The older doctor there runs the practice alone, has been alone too long, and he needs support. And the assistant, a real doctor, a proper one, is you now. I'm not ready, you confess to me. I don't think I'll ever be ready. Nobody's ready for what's coming, not really, not entirely. And I hear in your voice the fear of a whole generation that has to be perfect, that must be perfect just to exist, to be respected, to not fail. And I see that you believe perfection is the goal, that your life is a straight line, a path to prove you're worthy of being a doctor. The landscape outside is wintry and calm, and it's as if nature is preparing you for stillness, for concentration, for the attention you'll need. Few people on the fields, trees that look like skeletons, like the skeleton systems you studied at school. A sky that's only white, empty and still. And through it you travel, this young woman, 29 years old, 29 and a doctor, 29 and responsible, 29 and ready, even if you don't believe it. This new light in an old practice, a new doctor in a small village where people will need you. The doctor sent me 2 pages of notes, you tell me, and show me your phone with trembling hand. They list the patients who'll come tomorrow, their medical histories, their problems, their life stories. And I've read it all, learnt it all, memorized it all, made notes on notes, and still I feel like a child playing doctor, dressed up as someone who knows, who's supposed to understand. But your eyes tell me you don't believe that you know it's a lie. Your eyes tell me that underneath all this fear is a very, very competent doctor, that your hands know how to heal, that your heart knows how to listen. You ask me if I think doctors are frightened too, if good doctors are frightened. And I say calmly, the best ones are. The ones who aren't are the dangerous ones. The fear is the reason you'll be good, because you'll care, because you'll be careful, because you won't think you know everything. That seems to calm you. You nod slowly, as if that makes sense. And it does make sense when you hear it said aloud. You tell me a bit about your family. Your father is a lawyer, a very successful lawyer, one of the best in the city. Your mother is an academic, a professor, also very successful in what she does. Your sister already has her doctorate before she was 30, has children, school is perfect, life looks perfect. And you? You're the youngest, the one who chose medicine, who's trying to heal everyone, help everyone, who carries the fear in the face of real people with real illnesses, who doesn't just know theory, but whose decisions have consequences, real lives. Your family loves you, yes, but there's a pressure, a silent pressure, always to be good enough, always to do well. Someone could die because I make a mistake, you say very quietly. Yes, I say honestly, that could happen. But someone could also live because you don't make that mistake, because you're careful, because you ask when you're not sure. The train is barely full, and yet you feel observed, judged, as if everyone on this train is an examiner looking at you and deciding whether you're worthy. You shift the position of your rucksack, check your phone, though you only just checked it. The nervousness is like a second body you carry with you, a second skin that's too tight. Wolfenbüttel is a small town, you told me, with a gentle pride in your voice. 2 schools, a hospital in the village, a pharmacy, a dentist, and Dr. Reisert, the old doctor, who's been alone, who's aged alone. Or Dr. Reisert and now you. The patients are the same year after year, decade after decade. They know each other, know their grandparents, know who gets sick and why. And they'll slowly get to know you, will trust you, will test you, will see you. I'm so different from the old doctor, you reflect, and your voice is full of doubt. I'm young, I'm female, I'm modern, I have different ideas. What if that doesn't fit? What if people want an older doctor, a man who's like their fathers and grandfathers? But I think it will fit. I think people need change, gently but truly, that they need new life, that they need someone who isn't tired, who wants to start fresh, who's alive. You open your rucksack and show me your stethoscope, brand new, polished, gleaming, still with the little stickers on it. You gave it to yourself when you graduated with your first savings. And now you sit here, and the stethoscope sits in your rucksack. And it's no longer just a symbol, no longer just an object you need to have. It's a tool. It's your tool. It's your responsibility. I'll do good work, you say to yourself, not to me. It's a promise you make to yourself, aloud, so it becomes real, so it exists in the world. It's a promise to yourself, to the people in Wolfenbüttel, to the patients who'll come to you tomorrow. And I believe you, completely, unshakably. The cold outside grows as you draw near, and it's as if nature is preparing you, showing you that cold and warmth can both exist, both are necessary. And I see how your breathing grows calmer, how your hands stop trembling, how your body settles. That's what great people do. They breathe through the fear until the fear is there but doesn't guide you anymore. Until you can see that you can do this, that you really can do this. The train arrives in Wolfenbüttel, and you gather your things, your rucksack, your stethoscope, your whole future. You stand up, and your body is calm now. Fear is still there, yes, but determination is stronger. You'll be wonderful, I say, and you smile. This time really, from your heart. Not the smile of fear, but the smile of someone who knows that life is starting now. Lean back, my friend. Let me tell you of a man who spent his whole life on water, on a river that flows through the heart of Europe. The train from Prague to Munich runs along the Moldau, the famous Moldau. When you look out the window, you see the water again and again, green and sluggish, like a great sleeping dragon that's been dreaming for 1,000 years. The banks change between dense green forests and open free fields. On such a hot afternoon, an old, dignified man sat across from me, his skin as deeply furrowed as the water itself, which he knew and loved his whole long life. His name was Václav, and he was a river boatman, one of the very last, one of the wise old boatmen. Not one with modern motors and navigation equipment, you understand. Václav still sailed with the old barges, heavy-laden wooden boats that had been traveling up and down the Moldau for generations. The barges were large and unwieldy, but they were durable, reliable. It was a profession slowly dying, displaced by faster motorized ships. But Václav couldn't imagine giving it up. The water was his home. He showed me an old photograph, yellowed by many years. On it was his barge, a long, flat, broad wooden structure on which heavy hay bales, grain, or great barrels were stacked. On the old photograph stood he himself at the bow of the barge, younger then, with full strength and energy. But his eyes were already the same as now, calm and deliberate, alert, observing, familiar with every secret of the river. Václav told me of his journeys, and as he spoke, his old eyes lit up as if he were seeing the past before him. He started early in the morning, when the Moldau was still misty and the banks looked like dreams, soft and unreal. The river was his employer, his teacher, his confidant. He knew every bend of the water, every hidden stone, every dangerous point where the current became treacherous and could surprise you. The journey from Prague to Munich needed time, lots of time. Many days sometimes, depending on what he was transporting and what additional cargo he took on along the way. Sometimes 5 days, sometimes 7, sometimes even longer. But Václav never rushed. No, never. That wasn't the way to travel on a river. You had to adapt yourself completely to the river, respect and understand its rhythms, not have the river adapt to you. The river was older than all people together, older than civilizations, older than kings. He described to me the smells, the sounds in great detail. The water splashed against the sides of his heavy barge like a soothing song, an old lullaby that had been played for thousands of years. When the wind was right, it smelled of wet wood and wild herbs wafting from the green banks. There was also the fine smell of mud, of life, of fertile earth itself. Sometimes, he said in the tone of a man who knew secrets, he only needed to hold his hand in the cool water to feel how fast the river was, whether a great storm was coming in the distance, whether the water level had risen during the night. The river was his newspaper, his weather forecast, his entire communication system. The summer nights on the river were, as Václav said, the most precious thing there was. More precious than gold, more precious than money. He'd moor at a quiet bank and lie on his barge under endless stars. The night was so warm and gentle that you hardly needed blankets. Only a light blanket, perhaps. The air smelled of reeds and the fine scent of sunflower oil mills that stood further downstream. The Moldau flowed beneath him, quiet, enduring, rhythmic. An older brother protecting you and never needing to speak. Sometimes other boatmen came, and they'd sit together on their barges, smoking their pipes and speaking little. That was enough. Sometimes one would say, "The river is good to us today," or "The water level has risen. It was a good night." And that was all that needed to be said. More would only disturb the silence. Václav had no family left, no. His wife had died many years ago, still a young woman, far too soon. His children lived in Prague, the great city, and paid little attention to the old life of their father on the water. They didn't understand it, couldn't understand it. But Václav was not lonely, no, never. The river was his family, his whole home. The other old boatmen were his brothers, his true brothers. And every load he transported, every journey downstream, was a reason to get up in the morning and see the world once more, experience it once more. As we spoke, as he revealed these secrets to me, it gradually became evening. The sun slowly sank over the plains that stretched from the Moldau. Everything became golden and pink, glowing warm like living fire. Václav leaned his tired head against the train wall and looked out at the green water. I saw his eyes grew moist, wet with tears, though he didn't seem sad, rather transcendent. He told me openly that he knew his profession wouldn't exist much longer. The motorized barges were becoming more common, aggressive new ships that were faster, much faster, that transported in a few hours what took old Václav days. The young didn't want to work like that anymore, didn't want to be so patient. But that wasn't his worry, no, really not. He had lived as he wanted to live. He had served a river, a great river that had flowed for 1,000 years before Václav was born, and would flow another 1,000, another 10,000 years after he was long gone. That was a comfort to him. "That is the secret," he said quietly, almost whispering. "You must make yourself small. You must understand that you're not important, that you're only a visitor. Then everything becomes easy. The fear goes away. The hurry disappears." I asked Václav if he was afraid of the coming time when he couldn't work anymore, when his old body would become too weak. He slowly shook his head. "Afraid?" he asked back. "No, really not. The river will take me in someday. It will understand me. I'm a part of it, just as the river is a part of me. There's no difference between us anymore." It was a strange answer, but also deeply comforting. Václav had completely dissolved himself in his craft, in the river which was his whole life. He was no longer really individual, not isolated. He was part of something larger, something bigger than a single life. And that gave him genuine peace, deep peace, that nothing could shake. The train crossed an old stone bridge, and for a moment you could see the Moldau gleaming in the last light of day like liquid silver. Václav stood up slowly and took his small rucksack. He was ready to get off at Melnik. Before he left, he pressed the old faded photograph into my hand. "For you," he said, and his voice was full of tenderness. "So you don't forget that there are still people who live slowly. People who breathe with the river, who listen to the water. People like me." And the landscape outside grew softer. The outlines of the trees dissolved. The fields became dark shapes across which the moon sometimes slid its pale light. I felt my breath growing slower, my heart slowing, my whole body sinking down into the warm embrace of the seat cushions, into the warm embrace of this train that carried me, asking nothing of me. That was a good feeling, a rare feeling, to be carried without effort, simply to trust that the wheels keep turning, that the rails go on, that morning will come eventually. The train rolled smoothly on, and outside, the world was now quite dark. Only a few lights in the distance, single windows where other people too were settling down to rest. I thought how many people in the world at that moment were falling asleep, each in his bed, in his compartment, in his room, and how we were all part of a great, quiet movement, a movement into sleep. The rhythm of the wheels on the rails, ta-dum, 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 was like the breathing of a great friendly creature that carried us all together, through the darkness, through time. Settle yourself comfortably. I'd like to tell you a story about salt, about an element that's occupied people for thousands of years and whose craft is nearly forgotten. The train from Kraków to Wieliczka is short, not long, usually just half an hour. But on one of those hottest summer days, when the heat lay across the plains of southeastern Europe like a heavy blanket, and even the train windows became hot to touch, a man sat across from me whose hair and beard were white as salt, luminously white. His name was Tadeusz, and he was a salt boiler, one of the very last, perhaps the last of all. Wieliczka is famous for its salt mines, gigantic underground cathedrals carved from pure salt, hundreds of meters beneath the earth. These mines are like works of natural art, but Tadeusz didn't speak of those great tourist mines. He spoke of the old, labor-intensive shafts from which precious salt water still rose up today, warm and bitter. And this water he still boiled today, just as his family had done for generations before him. He opened carefully a small, old metal tin and showed me a white, high-quality crystalline substance. His salt, his entire pride. It glinted in the warm sun coming through the train window, looking like tiny, perfect diamonds. "That is my life," Tadeusz said quietly. "Every single crystal, a story of time, of patience, of trust in the earth." The craft of salt boiling is ancient, very ancient indeed, and nearly completely forgotten in this modern, fast-paced time. Tadeusz led me through the process with great patience whilst the train rolled along. In the early morning, he said, when it was still cool, he'd go to the springs where salt water rose from the old, deep shafts beneath the earth. Those shafts were hundreds of years old, some thousands. The water was very bitter and concentrated, full of minerals, full of the memory of the earth. He'd connect it in large, heavy containers and carry it to his house. A white, modest village cottage with a thatched roof, like so many in that old, quiet region. There he had large, shallow pans made of old copper. He'd fill the pans with salt water and let them simmer over a wood fire. For hours, sometimes from sunrise to sunset, from early to late. The water would steam and gradually disappear, like a dream that fades. And at the bottom of the pans remained salt crystals, white and pure. It sounded simple work, but it was difficult and hot, very hot indeed. The steam, Tadeusz said with respect for his craft, was bitter and made your eyes water, made your throat sore and scratchy. But you grew accustomed to it, as you grow accustomed to everything, to heat, to tiredness, to solitude. You need only maintain the correct temperature, and that was the deep secret. Not too hot, or the salt would burn and turn dark and bitter. Not too cool, or the water would evaporate too quickly, and the crystals would grow too large and clumsy. You needed a fine touch, experience from decades, an ear trained to hear the subtle sounds of simmering water. Tadeusz told me his father and grandfather had done the same, and their fathers before them. There were old records, handwritten books, noting the best times for boiling, depending on the season, temperature changes, even the phase of the moon. Tadeusz laughed when he said that, admitting he didn't quite understand why the moon should play a role. But that was how it had been passed down, generation to generation. And the tradition was important. You didn't ignore what your grandparents knew. The salt he made was of the highest quality, truly exquisite and precious. It was pure white, luminous, without the slightest impurity, with a fine, complex flavor that danced on the tongue like music. He sold it to small traditional shops in Krakow and in the remote villages round about. There weren't many buyers, damn few in this modern world, truth be told. Most people today bought industrial salt, cheap and soulless, mass-produced. But some, the old cooks still, the traditional, meticulous bakers, they sought his salt. They knew this salt was different, that it tasted of history, that it tasted of love. Tadeusz didn't earn much from his craft, certainly not. It was hard to understand why he still did it for so little money. But when I asked him, he smiled gently, with great tenderness. "Because someone has to," he said. "Because the tradition will die otherwise. Because it's beautiful, and beautiful things are important." As the train approached Wieliczka, early evening was coming on. The sun slowly descended over the plains, and the light grew warm and golden. Golden like the salt Tadeusz made. The light was soft and soothing. Tadeusz gazed out at the landscape, his home. Everywhere warm, gentle summer evening air drifted through, the kind of air suited to work and thought. The scent of hay and distant sunflower oil mills drifted through the open train windows, sweet and calming. I asked if he had sons or daughters, someone to whom he could pass on his knowledge, his precious tradition. He slowly shook his head, thoughtfully, very thoughtfully. "My children don't want to," he said, without bitterness, without accusation in his voice. "They want to live easier, faster, more modern. And that's right. absolutely right. I wish them to have it far easier than I've had it. Life is hard, too hard sometimes. But the old craft will die with me, I think. That's the truth. The sad truth. It was a sad thought, a deeply melancholic truth. Yet it also possessed a noble dignity. But Tadeusz seemed completely at peace with it, at peace with the inevitable, with an inner calm that only old men who have lived long possess. He had lived his life rightly. He had practiced his craft with all his strength, with all his love. And that had to be enough for a man. Tadeusz also told me about the great salt mines beneath the city. Enormous underground cathedrals, hundreds of meters deep. These mines had become tourist attractions. But Tadeusz wasn't interested in that. He knew the real salt craft wasn't in the mines, but here, in his kitchen, in his pans. That was the real work, the real art. The tradition was like a light growing ever dimmer, but as long as Tadeusz still lived, that light shone. And if the tradition died with him, at least one family could say, there was a salt boiler, a real one, a genuine one. And for a moment, the world was a better place because he existed. When we arrived in Wieliczka, that old salt town, Tadeusz rose slowly, with the movements of a man who had spent long hours bent over his work. He took his little tin of salt, his life's work in compressed form. Before he stepped down, he placed a few crystals on my palm. "Taste it," he said. "Try it." And I did, carefully, respectfully. The salt was truly different from anything I'd ever tasted. It wasn't simply salty, wasn't straightforward. It tasted of earth, of depth, of water, of patience. It tasted of the long history of a man who devoted his entire life to something simple and beautiful. And somewhere in that dark landscape, I thought, other people sleep now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them, and the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place, the forests are in their place, the rivers are in their place, and I am in my place, here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle of wood and cloth and metal, carrying me where I need to go, without needing me to be awake, without needing me to do anything but trust and rest. The train entered a tunnel, and for a brief moment it was completely dark outside. Just the rushing sound, just the echo of the wheels on tunnel walls. Ta-dum, ta-dum. And then we emerged again, and the night received us as a mother receives her child back into her arms after a brief outing. I thought how beautiful that is. Tunnels and night, and tunnels again and night again, and on and on and on. And eventually, you no longer notice what's outside and what's inside, because everything flows together, because everything becomes one, because sleep is so near now, you can almost smell it. Lean back and breathe deeply. Today I'm going to tell you about a gentle craft, one that has to do with bees and wax, and about a man whose hands always bore a slight yellowish tint from his work. The train from Suceava to Radouci travels through landscapes barely changed over 100 or perhaps 200 years. Bukowina is a wonderful region in the eastern Carpathians, wild and green, full of life. On one of those endlessly hot summer days, when the plains shimmered like water and storks stood motionless on church steeples, dreaming, a man sat across from me, whose face carried the golden color of dark honey, sun-bronzed. His name was Gheorghe, and he was a beeswax maker, a master of his craft. Not a beekeeper, mind you. That's something different, a different craft entirely. Gheorghe collected the wax that came from beekeepers, rough blocks of wax mixed with pollen. He cleaned it, refined it with patience, transformed it into something pure and beautiful, into crystalline loveliness. He made candles from it, long, thin candles, and also salves, healing balms for people with sore hands or persistent coughs. He carried with him a small, precious glass vial full of yellowish-white, high-quality wax. It was soft and smelled wonderful when I caught its scent, of sweet honey and something even more delicate that I couldn't quite name. "That is the heart of my work," Gheorghe said with a soft, reverential voice. "Bringing the beeswax into its pure, perfect form. It's almost sacred work, true spirituality." Gheorghe told me about his workshop in Radouci, a small, quiet house at the edge of the old town, hidden among wildly growing gardens and ancient, tall linden trees. There he processed the raw wax, the raw material of his art. It arrived in large, heavy, shapeless blocks, yellowish and brown, mixed with impurities, pollen, propolis, sometimes the remains of bee larvae, honey fragments. That was natural, authentic, as it should be. But it needed to be cleaned with patience, needed to be refined. The process was lengthy and demanding, requiring calm, attentive concentration. Gheorghe warmed the wax very gently in large, old copper vats over low, carefully controlled heat. Pure water was added, and the wax melted slowly, very slowly, like a beautiful dream unfolding gradually. It released the heavy substances, which sank to the bottom. Then he let the water evaporate slowly in the warm, gentle air, and the pure, luminous golden wax solidified in specially hand-shaped molds. It took days sometimes, several long days full of patience. But Gheorghe never rushed. Never. Haste ruins the work, destroys the natural beauty. He described the work of making candles with great care. The purified wax was white or pale yellow, depending on how much propolis remained, how much of the bee's essence was still within it. He'd form it into candles, long, thin ones for churches and their altars, thicker ones for homes and living spaces. The wax was warmed gently, poured into molds, and then the wicks went in, hand-twisted strands of cord that he made himself. The candles dried overnight in a cool cellar. By morning, they were finished, perfect, with a smooth, glossy surface that shimmered like silk. The salves were even more subtle, far more complex in their making. The pure, high-quality wax was carefully mixed with essential oils, sometimes with precious honey, with wild, valuable herbs from the high mountains. St. John's wort for wounds and injuries, gentle chamomile for inflammation, glowing calendula for healing. Gheorghe had old, proven recipes passed down from his grandmother, handwritten notes on yellowed, thin paper. He followed them not mechanically or slavishly, but they gave him direction, inspiration, a framework. He trusted his fine sense of smell, his subtle, refined feeling for rightness, for the perfect balance between ingredients. "The summer nights in his workshop," Gheorghe said with a touch of wistfulness, "were the greatest gift life could offer." He'd sit outside on a bench made of old wood once the day's work was finished and watch the bees still flying even in the dusk. They'd return to the hive one after another, laden with pollen, laden with the lifeblood. He'd watch them and thank them silently in his thoughts for the wax they gave him, their gift. This wasn't sentimental feeling, no, but deep, genuine recognition, true gratitude. The warm, gentle summer evening air carried the sweet scent of the lindens and dried hay from the fields beyond the town. Sometimes, too, you'd catch the distant scent of the sunflower oil mill, whose smell was sweet and oily. Altogether, they created a world that was peaceful and right. A world as it should be. Gheorghe told me that many of his important customers were the great churches, old, venerable churches with high, pointed spires. They regularly bought his candles for their altars, for their holy, consecrated spaces. It was an honorable, meaningful task in his life. The bishops and priests knew these candles were handmade, crafted by someone who respected his old craft, who held it almost sacred. But simple people, too, always came to him, especially old, wise women who bought his healing salves for their sons with sore, injured wrists, or for their weary, exhausted men with stubborn coughs. Gheorghe also spoke warmly of the bees themselves, with great respect and deep love. For him, the bees weren't simply producers of raw wax material. They were artists, true masters of their intricate crafts. They built their honeycomb with perfect mathematical precision, every single cell exactly right. Gheorghe admired them profoundly for this perfection, this endless patience, this devotion. And when he cleaned the wax with care, when he transformed it into wonderful candles, he was merely a humble, quiet helper to the bees, a translator of their great gift into a form that people could understand and use. The craft also gave him a sense of continuity, of knowledge passed down through time. He was part of a long, unbroken line of beeswax makers, stretching back to the distant Middle Ages. All those who came before him had done the same thing, with almost the same old tools, with the same deeply inner care. That gave him real security, real trust. It gave him the profound feeling that his daily work mattered, that it was part of something greater, something that outlasted generations. As we spoke, the sun sank lower. Bukowina took on its golden, warm coloring. Gheorghe leaned his head against the train wall and gazed out. His face was peaceful. He's lived his life rightly, I thought. He would die without great regret. When we reached Radowutsi, darkness finally fell. Night laid itself over the town like a soft black blanket. Gheorghe rose slowly, with the careful movements of an older man who had spent long hours bent over his work, over his wax vats. Before he left, He pressed the small glass vial with the pure golden wax into my hand. "Use it well," he said in a warm voice. "Rub it on your tired hands when the day has worn you down. It will show you there's still beauty in the world, that there are still people who work with care." And as the train continued through the night, ta-dum, ta-dun, I noticed how my thoughts grew slower, how the images in my head grew softer, how the edges blurred. The voices I'd heard became a gentle humming, a sound like distant bees, or like an old song heard in childhood that you can't quite remember now. The warm air current in the compartment settled around me like a blanket, and I felt how my shoulders slowly sank downward, how the day's tension fell away from me, piece by piece, like leaves falling from a tree, without haste, without sorrow. And somewhere in this dark landscape, I thought, other people sleep now in their beds, in their houses, and the moon looks down on them. And the moon looks down on us, and everything is in its place. The fields are in their place. The forests are in their place. The rivers are in their place. And I am in my place. Here in this carriage, here in this warm cradle of wood and cloth and metal, carrying me where I need to go, without my needing to be awake, without my needing to do anything but trust and rest.